What Americans need to understand is that if Iran were to be successful, God forbid, 1,000 times in hurting or damaging the state of Israel, they will not be done. They will not say, oh, we've accomplished our mission. They call Israel the little Satan, and they call America the great Satan. And maybe it will be more than one. What do they need intercontinental ballistic missiles for? You don't need one of those to hit Israel. It's not intercontinental.
That's
intercontinental ballistic missiles are to hit our NATO allies in the United States of America. We are giving them the money, the time, and the ability to get nuclear ability for people who say that they want to kill our ally and then to kill us. It's insane.
The signing of the Abraham Accords were essential, folks, to the growth of the American relationship with Israel. And what has happened since has been pretty much heartbreaking. I think that we have learned so much from not only the past and that relationship, but what it can be in the future. And I have a very, very, very special guest on today's show that was part of the creation of the Abraham Accords, that was right there when it happened. So important. And it's Rabbi Aryeh Lightstone. And I mean, he's just so much fun and he can break this down. And guess what? The Accords were announced on August 13th, 2020, which means this weekend will be the 3-year anniversary of the Abraham Accords. I think one of the greatest achievements of President Trump's term in office. I can't even begin to tell you what an achievement that is. I studied Middle Eastern foreign policy and I lived in Saudi Arabia for a good bit of my childhood. And to see this happen was truly a miracle, in my opinion, and just an enormous achievement by President Donald Trump. And he wasn't given the credit that he should have been given for this. On today's show, remember, I'm joined by Aryeh Lightstone. He's the one that helped make this deal happen with Ambassador David Friedman and, of course, Jared Kushner, who was then an advisor to President Trump and his son-in-law. Folks, we're going to be there with him in 1 second, but Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold is a sponsor of the Sarah Carter Show, and gold and silver allow you to protect what you've worked so hard for. And I believe in diversifying. Diversify, diversify, diversify. That is what is so important for you, for your family, for the protection of your future. And right now you can get $5,000 of free silver. Yes, you can, on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sarah sent you. Yes, $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that I sent you. That'll allow you to protect your IRA, your 401k, with physical gold and silver, and you can have it delivered securely right to your front door. Get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sarah sent you. So don't wait. Call or click today, 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARAH, S-A-R-A, or go to protectwithsarah.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARAH, no H, S-A-R-A, or go to protectwithsarah.com. I am so happy to have you on the show, Rabbi Lightstone. I was bragging about you at the top of the monologue. I am grateful now to have known you for your friendship. We met in Israel. I told everyone about that. You're the former senior advisor to the U.S. ambassador to Israel. You were the special envoy for the Abraham Accords. I mean, your accomplishments run very wide. What is it like right now, seeing what has happened with the Biden administration with regard, I mean, it's been 3 years since the signing of the Abraham Accords, and we're coming up on the anniversary. What's going through your mind?
So 2 things. Number one, having a chance to meet you in Jerusalem was an enormous highlight. But I want you to keep track. The people that you meet in Israel or in Jerusalem, it's like in an accelerator. The relationships just mature so much faster because of part of the pressure in the chat. So even though we only know each other a couple of months, it feels like much longer, right? Because that's part of the special sauce that happens in Israel and especially in Jerusalem. And I wanted to start with optimism because I think that's important. And now we can talk about pessimism, which is the 3 years since the launch of the Abraham Accords. If you remember, August 13th, 2020, 10 a.m., President Trump hosts the first phone call between the leader of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, and the Prime Minister of Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin or Bibi Netanyahu, and launches then the first peace agreement that America has brokered or that Israel has had in more than 25 years. And in 123 days, from August 13th until January 20th, the end of President Trump's first term, there were 5 separate peace/normalization agreements that were negotiated, brokered, and began to flourish in the middle of COVID, when people couldn't fly places, when there weren't vaccines, all of this stuff. If you remember, the darkest, in the middle of a re-election, Israel was in the midst of also another election, and all of this happens, 5 different peace agreements in the span of 123 days. And then January 21st happens, and President Biden begins to govern, and he completely and totally walks away from the Abraham Accords. And so much so, I think I mentioned to you in Jerusalem, I wasn't intending to write a book. But in May of 2021, which was enough time to let it go from the transition from Trump to Biden, Matt Lee, the reporter for AP, stands up and asks Ned Price, the spokesperson of the United States of America, the spokesperson for the State Department, the person who works directly for Secretary of State Blinken, is asked by a U.S. reporter, what do you call those negotiations or agreements that the United States of America brokered just months ago? And they're 2 minutes and 47 seconds. You can watch it on YouTube, of Ned Price twisting himself into a pretzel with the flexibility of an American gymnast to not say the words Abraham Accords. And I'm like, how is this possible? I grew up where you were told if something was challenging, hey, it's not brain surgery, or hey, it's not peace in the Middle East. And we began to accomplish peace in the Middle East. And the representative of the United States of America to the world can't say the words Abraham Accords. So I sat down that night and began to write a book called Let My People Know, which is, what are the Abraham Accords?
And what does it mean for us and for our future? And it's Let My People Know, the incredible story of Middle East peace and what lies ahead. And it's a brilliant book. And the focus of the Abraham Accords, to me, it was in a way, it was a miracle in and of itself, because so many people had pushed that aside and said, this will never happen. We will never achieve peace in the Middle East. We'll never get to that point. And even right now, I'm looking at stories as you're talking about what's happening right now. There are already people out there, especially if you look at Iranian columnists and people in the Middle East, saying, well, any peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia is definitely going to cause a war in the Middle East. Like, they don't even want the Abraham Accords to even exist. They don't want peace at all. And the only explanation for that is because they want Israel wiped off the face of the earth. That is why they don't want peace in the Middle East. That's why they don't want to let my people know, right? I mean, is that something that you, when you think about what transpired during those months that led up to the Abraham Accord, was that something that you were all concerned about? I mean, I know you were working closely with Jared Kushner as well, but was this something that you were worried about, is how this was going to be played by those that are definitely enemies of Israel?
So, you and I were talking about this 2-tier justice system, which means that there's a rule for some people and not a rule for other people. And if you go back to COVID, there were the experts, and then there were the people with common sense. And the same thing existed in the State Department. If you remember, there was a law passed in 1996 called the Jerusalem Embassy Act, where Congress was fed up with the fact that president after president after president would not recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And Congress knew this didn't make any sense. So they passed by a broad bipartisan majority, 95% of Congress said that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. We must move our embassy there. We must move the ambassador's house there. 3-part law. We must do that. From 1996 until President Trump, nobody followed that law. They signed a waiver excluding themselves from having to follow that law, which the president's allowed to do, but they're skirting the will of Congress, the will of the American people. President Trump comes and he recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and opens up our embassy in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. Before both of those days, on December 6, 2017, when President Trump recognized Jerusalem, and on May 14, 2018, when he opened up his embassy in Jerusalem, all of the experts said that there will be war from Malaysia to Morocco, that embassies will burn, right? You'll see Benghazi, but it will be worse. That's what the experts said. And what wound up happening is nothing. Nothing wound up happening because when America acts like a superpower, other countries respect that because we respect ourselves. And when you're asking, were we nervous during the Abraham Accords, the answer at that point in time was no, because bluff after bluff after bluff of, well, then the Arab Street, then the Arab Street, then the Arab Street, and over and over and over again, it seemed to be very unclear who was running foreign policy in the Middle East. People nervous about an Arab Street or the United States of America. So when the U.S., UAE, and Israel decided they were going to help shape a new Middle East, there was not a concern. But your question is incredibly profound and important because today there is a concern. I'll give you two great examples of that. Just yesterday, we heard the news of President Biden releasing $6 billion to the Iranians in order to, quote, free 5 Americans from an Iranian prison to house arrest in Iran. So not only did we pay the highest ransom that America has ever paid for anybody ever, these Americans are not even back in America. They're now in house arrest in Iran. I don't understand that, and I'm ready and willing to listen to an explanation. I just can't fathom what one might be. But even more than that, go back 9 months from now. The only peace treaty negotiated in the Middle East under President Biden was reconciliation between Saudi Arabia, a staunch and important ally and friend of the United States of America, and our avowed foe, Iran. They came together with reconciliation because of the leadership of China. So explain to me how a Middle East goes from President Trump negotiating 5 peace treaties with our ally Israel and other allies of ours in the region to China walking into the Middle East and brokering a deal in between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It's devastating.
It's devastating because that weakness is visible and it's very palpable. And especially when you're thinking about nation states like, Iran and what is happening right now with China across the globe. I mean, China is definitely playing a huge influence in South America and Central America. We've seen China's influence in Africa. We've seen China and Russia threatening the United States. I mean, with war games off the coast of Alaska recently, with the balloon that went over first from Montana across the United States over our ICBM nuclear warheads, which I'm sure it was measuring depth of field inside our systems and trying to collect data and analysis. That seems to be pretty obvious. And they wanted us to know about it. So this is like the rumblings of real, I want to say the rumblings of possible war, maybe in a different way, proxy wars, certainly, but it is shifting the geopolitical scene in the Middle East right now, Rabbi. I mean, when we look at what's happening right now in the Middle East, we could be losing, we could certainly be losing our staunch ally in Saudi Arabia. I mean, Saudi Arabia, basically OPEC said, hey, get rid of the dollar, let's go with China, right? And we see what's happening in Ukraine. So how do we go from what President Trump had established to this? And can we ever get back to it in time before something bad happens?
Yeah, and that is the profound question. And what our friends and allies around the world are asking is for clarity. What is American foreign policy? Because what's happened over the last, let's call it 16 years now, there's been a Republican foreign policy. There's been a Democratic foreign policy. And our friends and allies are trying to figure out how do they plan their future, right? The America First foreign policy makes a lot of sense. What is the basic fundamentals of an American First foreign policy? America should do what is in America's best interest. Do you know what Israel's foreign policy should be? An Israel First foreign policy, because that's their obligation to their citizens. And China should have a China First. It makes sense to know where people are. So now if you're the United Arab Emirates and you're asking what's the American foreign policy, and their foreign and their senior diplomat, the head of their foreign ministry, who's a brilliant person, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, MBZ's brother, is sitting here trying to say, well, how do I plan out the next 25 years? I now have to care who wins an American election to know what their policy is going to be towards Israel, what their policy is going to be towards Iran, what their policy is going to be towards UAE. How do I calibrate that? How do I calculate that? And many countries are going to choose China, not because they prefer China's policy, but because when you're looking for a long-term plan, I know where China will be in 50 years from now. I have no idea where the United States of America will be in 50 years from now, and it's very hard for our friends and allies to be able to calculate. So you ask, how do we solve that? So with a leader who wants to come in, here's what I'd love to see happen. I've been thinking about this since August 13th, 2020. Whoever the president was going to be in 2021, Trump or Biden, was going to have a State of the Union address.
Right.
At that State of the Union, could you imagine inviting the heads of state from the 5 countries who made peace with Israel and asking for nothing in return other than full normalization? That's what they asked for, peace for peace with our ally. That should be rewarded by everybody. If you can imagine the president, Republican or Democrat, calling on those heads of state or their ambassadors who represent them in the halls of Congress during the State of the Union and calls up each of them individually to be able to stand like they do in those emotional parts of the State of the Union, every member of Congress but 3 or 4 would stand up and give a lasting standing ovation for each of those leaders. And do you know who that's important for? It's not so important for the American leaders. It's not so important for the Israeli leaders. But every other country that's debating whether or not to make peace with Israel is watching. They're trying to see, are you recognized in the most important, powerful halls of America or not? And if you're not, my risk reward doesn't make sense. But if you are, the list of countries running to make peace will be enormous because everybody wants to be close to the United States.
That's actually very profound. That actually would be an enormous message to the whole world that the United States will not back down, that the United States will stand firm by the side of its allies. And I think that's been I agree with you, our biggest failure on a foreign policy level. And I used to say it all the time when I was in Afghanistan and I would meet the new head of ISAF. They would roll in from McKiernan to McChrystal to, Scotty Miller, whoever it was. I would say to myself, as the new ISAF commander came in or the new units, are you going to stick with what everybody was doing before, or is everything changing again? Because that would always determine what I saw happening on the battlefield. And I was right. And every time I came back, I would say, the mission has changed, the system has changed, and the Afghan people would just be like, well, I don't know whether to stick with you guys or stand on the fence line, whether I should go with the Taliban, because I don't know if I can trust you to stick around to stay by my side through this. And you know what? Unfortunately, they were right. Because we saw what happened.
They were, we're close to the anniversary of that as well. And, one of the moments there, and this is, incredibly bittersweet to watch 13 Americans lose their lives who did not need to lose their lives, to watch our allies lose more faith in us than they needed to. It really, really gets to me because unforced errors are not acceptable by anybody. They're dramatically worse when you're the superpower. It was the day after the Afghanistan debacle, and that's probably not the appropriate word for it, that the Biden administration used the Abraham Accords title in the most profound way, meaning they knew what they did was terrible in Afghanistan and needed to pivot. And so they gave credit to the Abraham Accords right around the anniversary, which shows you the power of the Abraham Accords, but it really shows the pity of not having correct policy.
Do you blame at all? Do you think that the actions taken by President Biden in Afghanistan basically opened the door to our enemy states like Russia and their aggression in Ukraine, Iran, North Korea? Do you believe that when they saw the complete and utter failure of what was happening after 20 years of battle in Afghanistan with the United States, America's longest war, that was in effect the impetus for these nation states to then take advantage? I don't think they would have ever done it under President Trump at all. They
certainly wouldn't have done it under Trump. That's for sure, for a lot of different reasons. Afghanistan, look, I'm not positive which president ran that mission correctly.
Right.
And certainly the difference in between policy to policy, leadership to leadership, changing the mission back and forth certainly did not help. But Afghanistan was part of the straw that broke the camel's back. From my perspective, the most important decision by President Biden was re-engaging with the Iranians, meaning the Iranians had a simple foreign policy, which was called wait for Biden. And had Biden at his inaugural address stood up and said, look, Trump is terrible for 98 reasons, and he could have read the 98 reasons, and all the people there would have clapped for all of them. But even a broken clock is right twice a day. And on Iran, he's right. And on the Abraham Accords, he's right. Had he done that, you would have had 10 more countries join the Abraham Accords right now, and you would have Iran negotiating their capitulation. When there's light at the end of the tunnel, you can wait. And whether it was waiting for sanctions relief or it was waiting for $6 billion that they're going to get this week for kidnapping Americans, they are the greatest purveyors of terror in the world that we know them today. They're allies with China. They help Russia. I don't understand in any foreign policy how taking Iran off the ropes helps anybody. And
how is this going to appease Iran in the way the Biden administration thinks it could help? I mean, especially with the hostage deal and paying the money, basically paying all these billions of dollars to Iran to keep, our prisoners under house arrest there. How is this supposed to contain Iran's nuclear program and their goals into the future, like the New York Times is trying to profess? I mean, I just don't see that being accurate at all.
It's from the same thought process of if I defund the police and replace them with social workers, that suddenly these neighborhoods are going to be safer. Meaning, obviously, it doesn't work. But in the name of equity or the name of DEI or the name of ESG, you pick a three-pronged thing. It's all the same policy. I wish something, so I hope it's true, even though the rules of nature do not allow that to be. In the Middle East, and David Friedman said this so well, and Mike Pompeo said this from an even larger stage. In the Middle East, you're strong or you're dead. And Israel needs to be strong or it will be dead. Iran needs to know that we, the United States of America, are strong or we will be dead. And by our strength, we can go ahead. They will respect that. When we show weakness, it's devastating. It gives a vacuum for them to jump up and to grow. And the last 3 years has just been Iran getting stronger and stronger.
But they have to know this. See, this is where I was in Oakland, and I agree with you 100%. I get to Oakland. I talk to some of the NAACP leaders. They're calling on a state of emergency from the grassroots level saying, wait a minute. We have to have compassion, but we also have to have rules and laws, and people need to be punished. 80% increase in homicides in Oakland, mostly in areas most afflicted by that are the Black communities or the impoverished areas where children are walking to school and mothers are trying to get to work and dads are trying to get to work and communities are falling apart. But this administration, and there's others too, some in the establishment, some in the administration, are pushing for an Iran nuclear deal, knowing full well that the Iranians will not stop until their centrifuges are spinning, until they have pure uranium capability to have a nuclear warhead and be a leader in the world as far as having military equipment that they can challenge Israel with. That I always believe that the plan A for the people in our government, the Democrats or the liberals that agree with that, their plan A has always been to let Israel take care of it.
Yeah, and almost to that extent, I mean, Israel's plan A must be to make sure that Israel has the ability to take care of it, because Israel has discovered that at the end of the day, they have one true ally, the United States of America. But even that one true ally may not be with them at that moment that they need to decide. If you remember the Iraqi nuclear reactor that was blown up under Menachem Begin's leadership in 1981, that was condemned by the United States of America and by Ronald Reagan, who I think is a hero of mine and of so many of ours. He was not a fan of that. After it happened, he was a fan of it. But before that, he was not a fan of it. In 2007, when Omar blew up the reactor in Syria, provided by our North Korean friends. Also, the United States of America condemned that. So Israel has learned the hard way that when somebody says they want to annihilate the Jewish people in the homeland of the Jewish people, that they need to take it seriously. It's easy to sit in Minnesota or Iowa or Wisconsin or in Washington, D.C. and decide what is or not is not a grave threat. We have Mexico, we have Canada, we have the Pacific, and we have the Atlantic, and minus our border issue, which is a dramatic national security issue. There's nobody tomorrow looking with one bomb to eradicate the entire American people. That's how Israelis have to wake up in the morning, and they'll have to make that decision for themselves and by themselves. What Americans need to understand is that if Iran were to be successful, God forbid, 1,000 times in hurting or damaging the state of Israel, they will not be done. They will not say, oh, we've accomplished our mission. They call Israel the little Satan, and they call America the great Satan. And maybe it will be more than one. What do they need intercontinental ballistic missiles for? You don't need one of those to hit Israel. It's not intercontinental.
That's
intercontinental ballistic missiles are to hit our NATO allies in the United States of America. We are giving them the money, the time, and the ability to get nuclear ability for people who say that they want to kill our ally and then to kill us. It's insane.
It's absolutely insane. I mean, Iran is a cult-like state, a nation state run by cult-like leaders with their very real intention. I don't think they ever hide it. They're very adamant about the fact that we are the great Satan and that they want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth and the United States. Allegiance Gold, thank you so much for being a sponsor of the Sara Carter Show. And right now, folks, you can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. So go ahead, tell them that Sara sent you. Get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. So don't wait. Call or click today, 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, no H. Or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. Go to 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, no H. Or go to protectwithsara.com. Do you think that, and this is before I get into some of the more positive aspects, because I think there's so much to look forward to as well, come 2024. I mean, whoever is in office, maybe revamping or bringing back to life some of what you had started with Ambassador David Friedman under the Trump administration. But do you think that the United States, our leadership is naive? Or do you think they're just culpable? Because I would have to believe that they understand that there is a very real threat. They meaning, and I hate using that word, but people that work within this administration on a foreign policy, national security level. Of course, the Obama administration was the first to hold out the olive branch and really wanted to push for the JCPOA. And now we see this again, despite everything, they're doing this again. Where does your mind go with this? Because I have to believe that, it's just like the fentanyl coming across the border. I mean, we're just regular Americans. We're not working in the intel offices at the CIA or the DEA or, with a SOCOM or Northern Command or watching what's going on, in those secret meetings or those reports that are being analyzed. But we know that the fentanyl's coming from China. We know that they're mixing it and that there is in my opinion, a proxy war on our nation where our children are dying, our people are dying, either becoming addicts or being poisoned. But we still leave the border wide open. And then we have Iran that is promised and threatened and is the biggest supporter of terrorism in the world. And we are holding out the olive branch and giving them money. I mean, what is the rest of the world supposed to think about the United States policy if we're doing this with our enemies?
So your point is spot on. And this is what I'd love to see happen during this election cycle. It won't happen, but this is what the American people deserve. The American people deserve an honest debate about all of these policies. Let's not call each other names. Let's not figure out who is this and who is that, but let's chart the future of America. And let's elect the people who have the right convictions for what America looks like. I don't think any, and this, by the way, I'm a Republican. It's not a secret. I'm a Republican. I'm a supporter of President Trump's administration. I would be a supporter of any nominee on the Republican side. That much is very clear. But we have done a very poor job in articulating all of these cases. Now, we have to overcome the mainstream media. We have to overcome all of the things that stand against us. But Americans do not want fentanyl on our border. Americans do not want to go ahead and fund Iran. Americans do not want to defund the police. All of these things are couched under very lovely terms. And then the policies are the exact opposite. I'll give you a great example of that. Go back and watch the YouTube of the Democratic senators who voted in favor of the JCPOA. back in 2014 or 2015. Every one of them got up and gave a speech about how bad the deal is and then voted for it. Every one of them. Tom Cotton actually just gave his speech, just quotes from Democratic senators. Here is why the deal is terrible, and then they sat down and voted for it. So explain to me why any of those senators who voted for it also thought it was terrible, because they chose politics over policy. And I think we need to start electing people on both sides of the aisles who care about the future of America much more than they care about red or blue, because we've lost track of all of this. And that's fentanyl, and that's Iran, and that's Israel. I'll give you one other example to that. Please explain to me why this administration is interfering in Israeli domestic policies. They've got this whole thing on judicial reform, and we can spend time on this and that. Israel is a democratic ally of ours. Mm-hmm. We do not engage in domestic policy interference in any of the autocrats in the Middle East. But from a democracy, we're mixing in on a democracy with that. I mean, the level of inappropriateness there, and we just give a wave to it and say, okay, sure, you can do that. It's terrible.
Well, and we saw that even during the Obama administration. We saw that during the Obama administration, when the State Department was sending funding and getting involved in Israeli elections. And it's astonishing to me, because even in the United States, God forbid anybody say anything about the elections, because all of a sudden you're a conspiracy theorist, or people are afraid of even questioning it. I've talked to reporters who said, I just stay away from that. I don't even want to look into it. I'm like, well, wow, this is bizarre, because I traveled as a journalist to Afghanistan and I covered the elections there. And the biggest concern there was to make sure they were secured elections, that the UN was there overseeing, that they had inspectors, that everything was tidy and neat. Well, we shouldn't be afraid of questioning those things as well in the United States. Do you think, and then I want to ask you about working for Ambassador David Friedman and how exciting that was. And I mean, your book is amazing. So I want everyone to get out there. I want you to, if you want to know what the real story is behind the Abraham Accords and those that were involved, the true story, you have to read the book, Let My People Know, The Incredible Story of the Middle East, Peace and What Lies Ahead. And what lies ahead, I want to say that, and we'll have it up on my website at saracarter.com. But how do you respond to, to this investment by the U.S. in other people's elections, especially a democratic society like Israel, or in their politics? And yet the United States is like, whoa, you got to keep hands off of us. Nobody is allowed to say anything to the U.S. about their elections. We're fine. There's no elephant in the room.
As long as we don't describe the elephant, nobody will notice
it.
It's hard, and even harder than that in the context of the Abraham Accords. The other countries involved with the Abraham Accords are not democracies, or certainly are not full democracies. And they see the U.S. interfering in the Israeli democracy, and they sort of look here, and that's a sign of weakness, certainly for the U.S., but even more so for Israel. And here's the whole secret about the Middle East. And this, when we talk about David Friedman, he got this right on the first moment. When we stand with our allies, everybody else will follow along within various different degrees of variation, but in general will follow along. When we create a vacuum of space, it's not filled by the Costa Ricans. When we create a vacuum of space in the Middle East of our power and our influence, it's filled by the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese. So we have a choice. We can live in a world where the United States of America and the flag that it represents is the leader of the world in terms of thought and morality and all of those things, or we can just go ahead and outsource that to the Chinese and to the Russians, the Iranians. There's not a choice. I mean, there's not a third option. There's not Costa Rica. I really like Switzerland. They're lovely. The trains run on time. I'm saying that's not where it goes to. These are the two options that we have. And the canary in the coal mine is Israel. When we isolate from Israel, when we give a little bit of space with Israel, that means we give an enormous amount of space to other allies. It's incredibly dangerous.
So you mean Ambassador David Friedman and you wouldn't agree with leading from behind or turning over the issue of the Syrian civil war during the Arab Spring over to the Russians when, they crossed the red line and they used chemical weapons on their own people. I mean, doing that would not be the policy that you would put in place in any administration you would belong to, right, Rabbi? It would just be... Explain that, because I think this is important, because that's the policy that we ended up with under the Obama administration. It was revolutionary. Sure. He said he was going to change everything and put it upside down on his head and went on an apology tour, turned everything upside down, said America should lead from behind. We should not be the beacon of light for the whole world. We should allow other nations to do that, yet be invested in them. What would Ambassador Friedman have said to you? And I'm going to go there, and we're going to switch to the positive, just really quick before we wrap this up, because I want to end on a positive note here.
I'll give you the positive. When David Friedman was nominated to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel, our embassy was in Tel Aviv. Before Trump even made the nomination official, the press release from David Friedman, his interview was, "I am looking forward to working from my office in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel." He wasn't even confirmed as the ambassador yet. That's not leading from behind. He let. I mean, it drove everybody nuts that he did that, but in a positive way. He came in and said, "I'm the ambassador, but my value is that I have Donald Trump's cell phone number." And he has a moral compass that is incredible. It points due north. Same thing with Jared Kushner and Mike Pompeo. And certainly around Donald Trump, they were able to accomplish things that were incredible. I claim zero credit for any of these accomplishments. I did not know the president beforehand. I knew David, and I knew that David's relationship with the president had a chance to be meaningful. In a million years, I couldn't have told you how meaningful it was. I'm still in awe and pinch myself fairly frequently to realize the stuff that I had a small chance to be a part of.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. I know that I remember when you told me that story, you were telling all of us, and we were sitting there in the hotel's main ballroom, eating, and you gave a speech and you talked a little bit about that very first phone call where Ambassador Friedman asked you to basically join in. And that was a pretty compelling moment, because it was like you had not even expected this. It was something that came out of left field, and you were thinking to yourself, "Oh, wow. Well, this is going to be, this is going to be life-changing," right? Because you knew that things would be different.
Yeah, and if I was smarter, I would have known how different. But I think even if I was much smarter, I wouldn't have been able to really guess how different. If you look at my life, at least, that phone conversation that I had with Ambassador Friedman, followed up with a meeting in his house, changed not only my life, but the life of my entire family, and not just our 4 kids and my wife, but my parents and my siblings. I mean, from start to finish, there is nothing about our lives that is the same that it was 6 years ago when David and Tammy offered us to come on this incredibly exciting adventure. I mean, who would have thought that I have more friends in Bahrain and UAE and Morocco than I have in any of the NATO countries? I mean, that was highly unpredictable, right? And within Israel, from right to left, the one thing that they do agree on is that they love the Trump administration policies. And the Abraham Accords has a 95% plus approval rating in Israel. You can't get 95% of the Israeli people to agree that today is Tuesday.
Right, that's a miracle. That is a miracle. I mean, that's a 95% approval rating. So what can the next president do to right the ship? I mean, what can be done come next election to ensure that the Abraham Accords not only stay, but that they flourish, and that they have a chance to grow deep roots so that there can be peace not only in the Middle East, but across the world? I mean, this is about global peace, not just peace in the Middle East. It affects every one of us.
You are spot on. I think we can do 3 things. Whomever the president is on January 21st, 2025, they, or he or she, should call the heads of states of the countries that were part of the Abraham Accords and start with Israel. And they will lay out a bipartisan, but hopefully led by a Republican president, foreign policy that will get buy-in by the United States of America, not Republicans, not Democrats, but the United States of America. I would immediately then, as the advising the president, invite them to come to the State of the Union to be part of the speech, which explains that this is the foreign policy of the United States of America, and recognize them as we discussed. And then what will happen after that is there won't need to be any outgoing phone calls to which country is next. There will be incoming phone calls, because the Middle East and the world is divided in between two different types of leaders. Leaders who are worried about the next 50 years and leaders who want to blame somebody else for the past 50 years. The leaders who are interested in the next 50 years, they're all in. So let's make that happen. And you'll get country after country to be able to join the Abraham Accords. And that for Americans is fantastic, because the following thing: we've looked at the Middle East as a place that we send our young men and young women to sacrifice their lives. We take our hard-earned tax dollars, like we're doing in Ukraine right now, and we send it to a place that we don't know how it's being spent or where it's being spent. We don't need to do any of those things. Imagine a Middle East from Oman, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, Egypt, and Israel working together. Visa-free travel under the influence of the United States of America. Unlimited land, unlimited energy, unlimited capital, unlimited technology, unlimited allegiance to the United States of America. Do we want to beat China on a go-forward basis? You now have your single greatest asset to defeat China because of the Abraham Accords. It's a no-brainer.
It is a no-brainer. From your mouth to God's ears. And for everyone out there listening, when will you make peace? I think that is such a brilliant statement. And I pray, and I'll pray every day, Rabbi, that is the direction that we take, that the direction we take is one that brings peace to the world, that uplifts our nations, that gives us a moral backing, and that a strong foundation, and not one, unfortunately, that we're seeing right now where China and enemies of the Western world are attacking democracy and attacking our values all over the world. That's really terrifying. I have a lot of faith and a lot of hope that God's listening to you, Rabbi. So I think we're going to head in that direction, in your direction. And I thank you so much for being on this show. I'm so grateful for your friendship. And I hope I get to see you in Jerusalem when I'm there next year. So that'll be very exciting.
I can't wait to see you in Jerusalem or anywhere else. Thank you for what you do for the American people. It's really special.
Thank you too, Rabbi. And thank you. Say hello to your family for me. And I look forward to meeting all of them.
Can't wait.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Lightstone, for joining the show today. I can't wait to be back in Jerusalem with you, as well as my Israeli family. That's the way I feel. I feel like I've developed these really close bonds with my friends in Israel. Remember, you can join me too in Israel. All you have to do is go to SaraCarterIsrael.com. That's SaraCarterIsrael.com to sign up to join me on the trip to Israel next year. I'm telling you right now, and I'm warning you, it's life-changing in all the good ways. The book by Rabbi Lightstone is Let My People Know. It's the incredible story of Middle East peace and what lies ahead, and a lot does lie ahead. Remember, we have an election next year and a new president going into office in 2025. So let's make it happen, folks. Let's get this taken care of. Israel is a beautiful country, and I am proud to stand alongside my Israeli brothers and sisters and defend them from their enemies all over the world. If you love today's show and want even more of the Sara Carter Show, make sure you rate this podcast 5 stars and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, whether that's Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless your families. God bless Israel. God bless our nation. And God bless the great state of Texas.